Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today we're back with another War Pet refresh, this time talking about the Venom Lizard. Okay, it's a bit crazy. The very first video I ever did for my YouTube channel was the Venom Lizard, and since that time, I've basically never revisited it. I did a quick video talking about the proc rate for infection, but other than that, I've never come back, talked about the best builds for the Venom Lizard. And the other day, a user wrote me and sort of asked how to build out the Venom Lizard, and I wanted to link them to a video I'd done, and it was like, wow, the last video I did was the very first video on my channel, so hey, this one's probably due for a refresh. Okay, the Venom Lizard, it's been in the war game since war pets were introduced, and it's your default infantry pet, but it doesn't have to be used with just infantry. I'll take a look at the town skill here, and we'll talk in detail about this later on, but basically it works with any physical march. So can't work with mages, that's true, but it can work with archers and it can work with cav. And really the strong thing about the Venom Lizard, the reason why it endures so well even today, is you think about the proc on the Venom Lizard, and it's very simple. Like, for example, the Berserk Phage Drake, what does it need to proc? It needs you to put debuffs on the enemy march, right? The Golden Rock, what does it need to proc? It needs you to have the Passion buff. What does the Venom Lizard need to proc? It needs you to get hit, okay? That's a pretty easy condition to fulfill. Obviously, every unit in the game is going to get hit, and in particular, infantry is going to get hit by normal attacks. And not only does this work with every unit in the game so far, it's probably going to work with every unit in the game ever released. So your G7, G8, G12 infantry heroes, if we're still going at that point, probably going to be able to use a Venom Lizard pretty well, okay? Unless they introduce an infantry hero that doesn't get hit by normal attacks, the Venom Lizard's always going to be good, okay? Now, I mentioned that the Venom Lizard really is an infantry hero, but there have been some instances where it's used with non-infantry marches, right? Very early on, there was a very popular build where Kanara and Hosk were put together, usually with Hosk in the lead in this scenario. And basically the idea is you put these guys with archers and it's a counterattack build because these are both very sort of defensive heroes. Kanara in particular has a very strong like counterattack mechanism. And if you're a player that get out to T5 quickly, like in the first couple seasons, and you had these guys maxed out, you just put them with archers, put them outside your city, and let the poor T4 and below come hit you, and they'd kill themselves in your Kanara Hosk. It was very effective early on, and for that march, you want the Venom Lizard. Okay, I'm in Season 18. This really isn't a viable march anymore, but if you're earlier on and you are sort of have a strong starter like you've spent to get to T5 early, this is very viable, something you can easily do. Okay. The other sort of march we've seen more lately is a Cav counterattack build. It often has Hosk in it, but who it always has Kuma in it, right? And the counterattack Cav build, I'm not going to go over the specs here. It basically is what you think it is. You take all the counterattack skills, you send Cav out there, people see the Cav icon on their march and they just, focus fire to hell. And these guys, they do good counterattack. And for the counterattack Cav build, you also want a Venom Lizard. Okay, so let's talk through the unique skills of the Venom Lizard. And we'll start with its talent skill, Infection. The really great thing about Infection is that its attack range is very far. This means that, if your infantry's out there and you're getting hit by archers, you're getting hit by mages, the Venom Lizard's going to fight back. It does a very good job for you, okay? Now, by contrast, you take a look at something like, I don't know, the Bruin Bear. The Bruin Bear only hits things that are surrounding you, right? The Moon Bear only has melee range. Same thing with the Moss Rock, right? The Moss Rock range is melee. And this is why the Venom Lizard for open field has always been extremely competitive. You'll have a lot of people say that in open field, like, this is better than the new infantry pets when they get released. I think it's like on par, right? For open fielding, this does hit harder. This does hit, farther away, so you can, counterattack essentially the mages, the archers with this pet. The downside is the damage factor is lower than the other pets, and it's less good at dealing with swarms, but hey, still really strong for open fielding. It's always going to be strong for open fielding. It's sort of one of the reasons why it's never wrong to build a Venom Lizard. It's always going to be good. Like I mentioned earlier, the damage factor here is physical, so this won't work with mages, but like why would you ever want a Venom Lizard with mages anyway? So no big deal here. The one sort of big limitation here on the infection skill is it can only be triggered once every second, okay? Now, you'll see the proc chance here is 12%. That's not exactly high. But oftentimes what you'll find with the Venom Lizard is, with infantry in general, is you're going to get swarmed, you're going to hit by a lot of legions. And so that 12%, most of the time, it triggers every turn. The bottom line, the downside, however, is you can't trigger it more than once a turn. Okay, that's going to be relevant as we go through this. We're going to skip ahead and talk about intense infection. This is pretty straightforward. It just increases the damage that infection deals. This is a good skill, but there's nothing particularly complicated about it. The Amber skill on the Venom Lizard Advanced Infection, this is one of the ones that I always say avoid. This isn't like the Sand Lizard where the intense skill, intense stone aura makes your pet worse. Advanced Infection makes your pet better. It's going to give you additional trigger chance. Now you see here the chances here are pretty low, but okay, this is an Amber skill, so you're always looking at this. And this is not modified by the luck score. If you have max luck, this becomes about 6%. So in other words, it's a 50% increase from 12 to 18%, which seems like it's amazing, except that what I talked about earlier, your infantry tends to get swarmed, tends to get hit by a lot of marches every turn, and so you trigger this most of the time anyway. It doesn't make your pet worse. It's not like if you put it on there, you screwed up, but not a good use of Amber in my opinion. So let's talk through the builds for the Venom Lizard, and we're going to talk about both the budget build and the power build. We'll start with the power build, and here it is, okay? This is the build you want if you're building out your Venom Lizard. Obviously, you'd want to increase the skills and all these things to 3 stars if you're really building this out. 3-starring this stuff is expensive, but it does have the advantage of being like evergreen. It's hard to see a scenario in which the Venom Lizard isn't a viable pet. You might notice here that I have a 2-star advanced counter-strike. How did I do that? I put this on here like, many seasons ago before they did the changes to the war pet system, and when you could still get these, like, you could buy them from the pet shop or you could get them from drops, etc. Now, if you want to get advanced counter-strike, it's 3 stars or nothing. It's an Amber skill. And I do think it is very valuable for this pet, right? So what is the power build here? Well, obviously you have infection. You have intense infection to increase the damage of this. Then you have the Counter-Strike package, not intense Counter-Strike, that's not worth it. And then you have the pet damage enhancers. Okay, so what if you're doing a budget build? What should you do? Well, you really have 3 choices, right? Your first choice is to just increase the survivability of your march. If you're going to do that, you want to look at stuff like Terra Barrier, Robust Body, and Bristles, right? Those are all make your march more tanky. Look, the Venom Lizard's almost always going to be on an infantry march. You always want your infantry march to survive a long time. So these are all 3 good options, and in particular, the Venom Lizard typically has a pretty good endurance score, so Terra Barrier and Bristles are like good choices in that scenario. You want to put skills on based on the strong attributes of your pet, right? So if you have a good endurance, these are what you're put on there. The other skill you almost always want to put on there is Counter-Strike. Even if you're not going the pet damage route, Counter-Strike, even at a 0-star level, well, when it triggers, it counts as a Legion attack, and there are a lot of really good triggers that you can get on this. So I always put Counter-Strike on it, period, even if you're not putting any more pet damage enhancers, okay? So that's sort of like your I want to be tanky build. What if you want to do other things? Well, you're putting this on infantry in sort of like the reflection pet. It does damage to people that hit it. And so one of the things you should definitely think about is the counterattack package, right? So that is Blood for Blood, Hit Back, and Swift Revenge, right? Blood for Blood and Hit Back increase the crit rate of your counterattack, your Legion's counterattack, and then Swift Revenge gives you more crit damage when your Legion does counterattack. It's interesting this one is actually the most pricey at the moment because this one is useless unless you have one of these 2, and preferably both of these 2, right? These 2 guys stack. So that's always a good choice, and every infantry ever is going to do counterattack damage. So I think, this is a very solid, very safe choice, okay? The last thing you might think about is increasing the skill damage of your Legion. So sometimes this is good and sometimes it's not. If you want skill damage, it's Pursuit, Predation, and Track and Hunt. These are sort of like the increased crit rate. And then the payoff is Beast Mark, which increases the crit damage. Okay, what do I mean sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not? Well, let's take a look at some of the infantry heroes here. And for example, Goresh, right? Gorish does skill damage with his 3 skills here, and it does like this does a lot of damage when he's in a big ball. Now, look, the days of Gorish have kind of passed, but back in the day, Gorish could do really good reports with this, and it was all because of his Ruthless skill. Sorry, if you put the skill damage enhancers on here, this will increase, the skill damage of something like Ruthless. If you look at the 2 new infantry heroes like Elnar here, yeah, this is skill damage. So if you have a Venom Lizard with the skill damage enhancers on it, this is going to help that, right? Same thing with Joran here. On the other hand, obviously you have some infantry heroes that don't do any skill damage. Garwood here, and like in season 1, the best infantry pair was Garwood Madeline. Madeline does a little skill damage. Garwood does none. If you have a skill damage enhanced build on your Venom Lizard with these two, it's not very good, and you would be better off just going with the counterattack package, something like that. One of the advantages of the Venom Lizard is that it's evergreen. In theory, it should always be used with any sort of new infantry hero. And one of the downsides with the skill damage package is that as you go on, there's a chance they'll release really good new infantry heroes that don't do skill damage. And then you're kind of like, well, I can't use the Venom Lizard, or my Venom Lizard doesn't work as well. But these are very inexpensive skills. It is not tough to put these up to like even a 2-star for a free-to-play player. So it is something worth to consider out. Obviously, you can go with the counterattack package, things like hit back. Obviously, you can just go with the more tank package. But my advice to you is no matter what, make sure you put Counter-Strike on this pet, even if it's just the 0-star level. Okay, so are there any downsides to the Venom Lizard? Not huge ones, but there are a couple worth mentioning. The Venom Lizard has never been the pet of choice for the Rally Garrison meta, right? The current infantry pet has always performed better than the Venom Lizard in a Rally Garrison fight, in part because, that fight's taking place in melee range. The second downside is that the trigger here, and we've talked about this already, can only trigger once per second. It puts a damage over time effect on whatever it hits that lasts for 3 seconds. But the fact that it can only trigger once every second, and this dot, like on turn 1, you can hit the same enemy you hit on turn 2 and turn 3. It is possible. It makes the Venom Lizard a little weaker when being swarmed at melee range than the other pets, right? That's one of the reasons I like the Counter-Strike Advanced Counter-Strike package, because it helps you against the swarm effect a little bit more. But the upside is this is the only pet that really fights back effectively against range swarms, which infantry see a lot, okay? Hey, the Venom Lizard is still super strong. All these seasons later, all these war pets later, it's still a super good pet, particularly for infantry, but it does have some limited use early on for archers and more recently for cav in sort of a counterattack type march. All right, hey, that's all I got for you today. And until next time, you stay classy, Belleron.